What you know, Alibis. Welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. It's Tuesday, July 22nd. Hope you guys are having a good day so far. We're going to read the state's sentencing memorandum and wanted to say a big thank you to Justin Lum for posting this. He's always on top of the new filings. All right, so let's jump in. The first section is the summary of facts. On January 30th, 2019, Charles Vallow, Lori Vallow's husband at the time, called the Gilbert Police Department to report that the defendant believed he was Ed Schneider, that she said she was going to murder Ed Schneider, and that she was going to destroy him. This was the beginning of Charles Vallow's nightmare from which he was never able to wake. On January 31st, 2019, Charles repeated his concerns to the Gilbert Police Department about Lori's beliefs. Charles is recorded on body-worn camera video telling the police that Lori threatened to murder him, that Lori said Charles was dark, and she was calling him by someone else's name. Charles told the police that his wife believed she was a translated being and that she couldn't die. Charles explained to the Gilbert PD that he was concerned for his children and he did not know what she might do to them. Charles told the police that Lori told him to come get the kids and that she did not care what happened to them. Charles had sole custody of his son J.J. Vallow from the time Lori disappeared in February 2019 until April 2019, when the defendant came back into Charles's life. Charles invited Lori and Tylee Ryan to live with J.J. and him in Texas. When Lori wanted to move back to Arizona, Charles rented a house in Chandler, Arizona for Lori. Charles moved Lori, JJ, and Tylee into a house at the end of June 2019, and Charles remained living in Texas. On July 9th, 2019, Charles booked Adam Cox a flight to Arizona to help him with an intervention to try to get Lori back into the traditional LDS beliefs. A few minutes after Charles booked his flight, Adam called his brother Alex Cox and let him know he would be in town on the 10th and wanted to stay with him. The evening of July 9th, 2019, Lori told her brother Alex, "It's all coming to a head this week. I will be like Nephi, I am told, and so will you." After this text, Lori and Alex spoke on the phone for 56 minutes. The evening of July 10th, Alex drove to Lori's home with a gun and spent the night in Lori's house. On July 11th, 2019, Lori's threats to kill Charles came true. Charles came to the house he rented for Lori to pick up his son, JJ. Charles came to the house he rented for Lori to pick up his son, JJ, and take him to school. As Charles arrived, he saw Alex's truck and knew that Lori and her brother were planning something. Lori allowed Charles to put JJ into the rental car, and then she took Charles's cell phone and refused to return it. Lori was able to keep Charles inside the house by refusing to give him back his cell phone. No matter how many times Charles demanded the defendant hand over his cell phone, this defendant would not give it to him and instead walked around the house with his phone. At this time, Lori was holding Charles's cell phone. Alex came out with his gun. Alex shot Charles once in the chest, causing Charles to fall to the floor. As Charles lay on the floor, Alex shot him a second time in the abdomen. Lori left the scene in Charles's rental car while Alex stayed at the house and staged the scene. Lori and Alex waited approximately 47 minutes before calling 911. Later, Lori and her brother went through Charles's phone before giving it to the police. The day after Lori and Alex killed Charles, Lori texted Charles's sons from his prior marriage and told them, "Hi, boys, I have very sad news. Your dad passed away yesterday. I'm working on making arrangements and I'll keep you informed with what's going on. I'm still not sure how to handle things. Just want you to know that I love you and so did your dad." By the way, that call came in July 12th at 2:36 p.m. Lori's text message to Charles's sons was not only distressing to them, but it was also devastating. Although Lori said she would keep them informed on what was going on, when Charles's son asked what happened, the defendant responded, "We are still waiting for the medical examiner report." I'll let you know more when I can. Charles's sons repeatedly texted Lori asking what happened to their father and for information about the funeral. Lori would not tell Charles's sons what happened or provide any real information. When she did respond, Lori acted like she did not know how Charles died. Eventually, one of Charles's sons reached out to their aunt Kay Woodcock about the text from Lori saying their dad was dead. Kay Woodcock also had no idea that her brother Charles was dead. Kay and her husband Larry were able to verify that Charles was shot and killed by Alex after they Googled his name. Kay then had to tell her brother's sons that their dad had been shot and killed by their uncle Alex. On July 15, 2019, Lori called Banner Life Insurance Company, claiming to be the beneficiary of Charles's $1 million life insurance policy. On July 18, 2019, the defendant learned that Charles had changed the beneficiary of his life insurance policy. The same day, July 18, 2019, Lori messaged her soon-to-be husband, Chad Daybell, and said, "So I talked to the insurance company. He changed it in March. So it was probably Ned before we got rid of him." Lori moved to Rexburg, Idaho in August of 2019 to be closer to Chad Daybell. Lori could have allowed JJ to go live with Kay, but instead, she brought JJ and Tylee with her to Idaho. Alex also moved to Rexburg, Idaho in August of 2019. Tylee was last seen alive on September 8, 2019 in a photograph from Yellowstone National Park. JJ was last seen alive on September 23, 2019 in a video outside Lori's apartment. The same day JJ was last seen, Alex began searching for places to practice shooting near Rexburg and for places to tint the windows of Lori's Jeep Wrangler. On September 25, 2019, Lori allowed Alex to take her Jeep Wrangler to Dan's Window Tinting in Rexburg, Idaho, and spent $200 to tint the windows so no one could see into the rear of the Jeep. Later that day, Lori and Alex went to Walmart in Idaho Falls, Idaho, and purchased a track phone for Alex to use for the next murder. Alex activated the Idaho Falls Walmart track phone on September 26, 2019. On September 26, 2019, Brandon Budro took custody of his children so his soon-to-be ex-wife, Melanie Budro Pulowski, could fly to Rexburg, Idaho. Melanice was the only person who knew Brandon's new address and was in contact with this defendant and Alex Cox. Melanice returned to Arizona Sunday, September 29, 2019. On September 30th, 2019, Lori Googled how to get the back seat out of my Jeep Wrangler and watched a YouTube video on how to remove the rear seat of a Jeep Wrangler. The defendant also took custody of Alex's Verizon cell phone that was subscribed to him and began acting as his alibi so Alex could drive to Gilbert, Arizona to shoot and kill Brandon Budro. Alex left from Rexburg, Idaho on the evening of September 30th, 2019 with the Idaho Falls Walmart track phone. Lori's Jeep Wrangler was seen on a DEA license plate reader in Arizona on October 1st, 2019. The rear tire had been removed from the Jeep. October 1st, 2019, Alex used his Gmail account to search for an address in Mesa, Arizona, and to search for directions to Brandon's rental house. While Alex was preparing to commit the murder of Brandon in Gilbert, Arizona, Lori rented a storage unit in Rexburg, Idaho, to store the rear seat and tire from her Jeep Wrangler. Video from the storage unit shows Lori and Chad putting the tire and rear seat into the storage unit on October 2nd, 2019. On the morning of October 2nd, 2019, Lori attempted to provide a fabricated alibi for Alex Cox. Lori used Alex's Verizon cell phone to call her cell phone. Both phones were using the same cell tower in Rexburg, Idaho. This call was at 8:02 a.m. Arizona time and lasted approximately 24 minutes. Meanwhile, the Idaho Falls Walmart track phone was utilizing cell towers around Melaniese's rental house in Gilbert, Arizona, before utilizing cell towers in the area of Brandon's rental property. On the morning of October 2nd, 2019, the Idaho Falls Walmart track phone and Lori's Jeep were outside Brandon's house for more than an hour, waiting for Brandon to return home. Brandon returned to his rental house at approximately 9:13 a.m. on October 2nd, 2019. Brandon immediately saw a Jeep Wrangler with no rear tire and a Texas license plate parked next to his driveway. As Brandon was slowing down, he saw the rear window lift up, a rifle barrel appear, and then he heard a bang, and his window shattered. Lori's co-conspirator, Alex Cox, missed killing Brandon by a couple of inches. Brandon drove off and eventually returned to his rental property. Alex drove off and took back roads to return to Rexburg, Idaho. On October 3rd, 2019, Lori and Alex went to her storage unit and removed the tire and rear seat for Lori's Jeep Wrangler and put them back on her Jeep. Tammy Daybell was killed just a little over 2 weeks later, on October 19th, 2019. Chad was the beneficiary of her life insurance policy. Tammy's death was later ruled a homicide. On October 5th, 2019, Lori married Chad Daybell in Kauai, Hawaii. On February 20th, 2020, Lori was arrested in Kauai and brought back to Idaho. Tylee and JJ's remains were discovered June 9th, 2020 on Chad's property. Tylee's remains had been dismembered and burned, and JJ's body was duct taped and buried in plastic bags. On May 12, 2023, Lori was found guilty of multiple counts to include the murder of Tylee, JJ, and Tammy Daybell in the District Court of the 7th Judicial District of the state of Idaho, in and for the county of Fremont. On July 31st, 2023, Lori was sentenced to multiple counts of life without the possibility of parole. On April 22, 2025, Lori was found guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Charles Vallow in Maricopa County. On June 12, 2025, Lori was found guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Brandon Budro in Maricopa County. Aggravating factors in Charles's case. The court may consider the following statutory aggravating factors when sentencing this defendant. Under Arizona law, the court may consider the statutory aggravating factor that this was a dangerous offense since it involved the use of a deadly weapon. The defendant knowingly, intelligently, and voluntarily waived her right to a jury trial on this aggravating factor and admitted that this aggravating factor existed. Under Arizona law, the court can consider the statutory aggravating factor that the defendant committed this offense as consideration for the receipt or in the expectation of the receipt of anything of monetary value. In this case, the defendant conspired with Alex to kill Charles on July 11, 2019. Lori called Banner Life Insurance on July 15, 2019 because she believed she was the beneficiary to Charles's $1 million life insurance policy. On July 18, 2019, Lori learned she was not the beneficiary to the $1 million life insurance policy. She texted Chad Daybell and said, "It's a spear through my heart." Lori then texted Chad that she would still get $4,000 a month from Social Security because of murdering Charles Vallow. When the defendant later learned that Charles made his sister, Kay Woodcock, the beneficiary, the defendant confronted her about the money. It's clear from the defendant's actions and words that one of the motives for killing Charles was for monetary gain. Under Arizona law, the court can consider the statutory aggravating factor that this offense involved the presence of an accomplice, Alexander Cox. The defendant knowingly, intelligently, and voluntarily waived her right to a jury trial on this aggravating factor and admitted this aggravating factor existed. Under Arizona law, the court may consider the statutory aggravating factor that Charles's family suffered emotional and financial harm as a result of Lori and the crime she committed. She knowingly, intelligently, and voluntarily waived her right to a jury trial on this aggravating factor and admitted that this aggravating factor existed. Nonetheless, to give the appropriate weight to this aggravating factor, the court will hear from the victims at the time of sentencing about the long journey they've endured to finally get justice for the death of Charles Vallow. Under Arizona law, the court may consider the statutory aggravating factor that Lori was previously convicted of a felony within the 10 years immediately preceding the date of this offense. In this case, Lori was found guilty on May 12, 2023, and sentenced on July 31, 2023, for the murders of Tylee, JJ, and Tammy, and for the theft of Social Security money that she continued to collect after the murder of Tylee and JJ. This conviction is from the District Court of the 7th Judicial District of the state of Idaho, in and for the county of Fremont. Aggravating factors for Brandon's case. The court may consider the following statutory aggravating factors when sentencing Lori. The court may consider the statutory aggravating factor that this was a dangerous offense since it involved the use of a deadly weapon. Lori knowingly, intelligently, and voluntarily waived her right to a jury trial on this aggravating factor and admitted the aggravating factor existed. The court can consider the statutory aggravating factor that this offense involved the presence of an accomplice, Alexander Cox. Lori knowingly, intelligently, and voluntarily waived her right to a jury trial on this aggravating factor and admitted the aggravating factor existed. The court may consider the statutory aggravating factor that Brandon suffered emotional and financial harm as a result of Lori and the crime she committed. Brandon testified at trial about the fear he experienced the day the shooting occurred. The court heard some bits and pieces of the ongoing trauma that Brandon experienced when he realized that Tammy Daybell had also died under unusual circumstances and that he was in fear for his life and the life of his children. Brandon knew that Lori and her brother were responsible for the death of Charles Vallow and possibly Tammy Daybell. He was so afraid that Alex and Melanice would return to finish the job that he took his children and went into hiding. While in hiding, Alex and Melanice showed up to a friend's residence and at his parents' home looking for him and their children. Brandon continued to be afraid for his life until Lori and her husband were taken into custody. Lori caused Brandon to suffer emotional harm, not just from the day of the shooting, but for months after. The court may consider the statutory aggravating factor that Lori was previously convicted of a felony within the 10 years immediately preceding the date of this offense. She was found guilty on May 12, 2023, and sentenced on July 31, 2023, for the murders of Tylee, JJ, and Tammy, and for the theft of Social Security money she continued to collect after the murders of Tylee and JJ. This conviction is from the District Court of the 7th Judicial District of the state of Idaho, in and for the county of Fremont. Recommendation: the sentence for conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, a Class 1 dangerous felony, is life with the possibility of release after 25 years. The court may run the sentences for both cases concurrently or consecutively to each other. They can also run the sentences concurrently or consecutively to her convictions in Idaho. Both conspiracy to commit first-degree murder cases have multiple statutory aggravating factors. Each case has its own victims, and each case has caused and continues to cause irreparable harm to the victims and their families. The state respectfully requests the court run both cases consecutively to the sentences in Idaho, in and for the county of Fremont. So that's it. I think that Miss Trina Kay did an amazing job of summarizing a very convoluted story in this filing. I will be live streaming sentencing on Friday, so come watch with the Alibiers. That is it for today. Hope you guys have a good rest of your evening, and we will see you soon.